Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back to the daily readings of Srila Prabhupada's books, right here in Hythe, Kent, southeast England, just next to the English Channel. Sri Krishnamani Prabhu and Abhaya Das Brahmachari and I live here in this little flat in the Haven. Hythe means the Haven. Trying to create an atmosphere which is conducive to hearing and remembering, chanting and remembering Krishna. And the Srimad-Bhagavatam, we've started reading now. This is the second day we've been reading the text. The mature realization of Vedas after he edited all the Vedas to a form which made them practical for Kali Yuga souls to access, and the Upanishads, the Purāṇas, the Itihasas. And then he himself composed the Mahabharata, which is a summary of all of the Purāṇas, and the Vedanta Sutra, which is the culmination of all the Vedas and Upanishads, a summary of them. And finally, after not being completely satisfied, he was instructed by his spiritual master, Narada Muni, to compose the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, which is the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. You know, we are following Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Bhakti Vedanta, the end of knowledge. Veda means knowledge, Anta means end. But Bhakti is the end of knowledge and the end of Vedanta. And Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the summary, the explanation of that Vedanta Sutra. So most spiritually inclined people in India are called Vedantists, but they have no idea about Bhakti, pure Bhakti. And so this Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam has been brought back into the world to deliver the world from its suffering condition. So let us glorify the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam by reciting Sanatana Goswami's Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Mahima Stotram first. It goes like this: Sarva Shastrabdi Piyusha, Sarva Vedaika Satpala, Sarva Siddhanta Ratnadya, Sarva Lokaika Drikprada. O nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine of the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana, Śrīmad-Bhāgavata Prabho, Kalidvandoditaditya, Sri Krishna Parivartita. O life air of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Sri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya, Prema Varshakshadayate, Sarvada Sarvasevyaya, Sri Krishnaya Namostute. I bow down to you, who were supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone. You are Sri Krishna himself. Madeka Bando Matsangin Madguru Man Mahadana Manistadaga mad bhagya mad ananda namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asadu sadhu tadayin atini chochatakara hanamun chagadachin mam premnarit kantayoks. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me. Always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're in the first chapter of the first canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, questions by the sages, and we've reached text 2, second text of a 3-text invocation of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. I'm not going to read all the Sanskrit of the whole Bhagavatam, but I am going to read the most prominent verses. Text 2. Dharma projita kaitavotra paramo nirmatsaranang satang vedyang vastavamatra vastu shivadang tapatrayon mulanam Śrīmad-Bhāgavate mahamuni-krite kyambayar parayar ishwarak sadyo ridyavato yate kritibi shubis takchanat. Completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavat Purāṇa propounds the highest truth, which is understandable by those devotees who are fully pure in heart. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. Such truth uproots the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam, compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva in his maturity, is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need of any other scripture? As soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of the Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Supreme Lord is established within his heart. Purport. Religion includes 4 primary subjects, namely pious activities, economic development, satisfaction of the senses, and finally, liberation from material bondage. Irreligious life is a barbarous condition. Indeed, human life begins when religion begins. Eating, sleeping, fearing, and mating are the 4 principles of animal life. These are common both to animals and to human beings. But religion is the extra function of the human being. Without religion, human life is no better than animal life. Therefore, in human societies, there is some form of religion which aims at self-realization and which makes reference to man's eternal relationship with God. In the lower stages of human civilization, there is always competition to lord it over the material nature. Or in other words, there is a continuous rivalry to satisfy the senses. Driven by such consciousness, man turns to religion. He thus performs pious activities or religious functions in order to gain something material. But if such material gains are obtainable in other ways, then so-called religion is neglected. This is the situation in modern civilization. Man is thriving economically, so at present he is not very interested in religion. Churches, mosques, and temples are now practically vacant. Men are more interested in factories, shops, and cinemas than in religious places which were erected by their forefathers. This practically proves that religion is performed for some economic gains. Economic gains are needed for sense gratification. Often, when one is baffled in the pursuit of sense gratification, he takes to salvation and tries to become one with the Supreme Lord. Consequently, all these states are simply different types of sense gratification. In the Vedas, the above mentioned 4 activities are prescribed in the regulative way so that there will not be any undue competition for sense gratification. But Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is transcendental to all these sense gratificatory activities. It is purely transcendental literature, which can be understood only by the pure devotees of the Lord, who are transcendental to competitive sense gratification. In the material world, there is keen competition between animal and animal, man and man, community and community, nation and nation. But the devotees of the Lord rise above such competitions. They do not compete with the materialist, because they are on the path back to Godhead, where life is eternal and blissful. Such transcendentalists are non-envious and pure in heart. In the material world, everyone is envious of everyone else, and therefore there is competition. But the transcendental devotees of the Lord are not only free from material envy, but are well-wishers to everyone, and they strive to establish a competitionless society with God in the center. The contemporary socialists' conception of a competitionless society is artificial, because in the socialist state there is competition for the post of dictator. From the point of view of the Vedas, or from the point of view of common human activities, sense gratification is the basis of material life. There are 3 paths mentioned in the Vedas. One involves fruitive activities to gain promotion to better planets. Another involves worshipping different demigods for promotion to the planets of the demigods. And another involves realizing the absolute truth and his impersonal feature and becoming one with him. The impersonal aspect of the absolute truth is not the highest. Above the impersonal feature is the Paramatma feature, and above this is the personal feature of the absolute truth, or Bhagavan. Srimad-Bhagavatam gives information about the absolute truth in his personal feature. It is therefore higher than impersonal speculations on the Jnana-kanda division of the Vedas, what to speak of the Karma-kanda division. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is even higher than the Upasana-kanda, because it recommends the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, the Divine Son of Vasudeva. In the Karma-kanda, there is competition to reach heavenly planets for better sense gratification, and there is similar competition in the Jnana-kanda and the Upasana-kanda. The Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is superior to all of these because it aims at the supreme truth, which is the substance or the root of all categories. From Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, one can come to know the substance as well as the categories. The substance is the absolute truth, the Supreme Lord, and all emanations or relative forms of energy. Nothing is apart from the substance, but at the same time, the energies are different from the substance. This conception is not contradictory. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam explicitly promulgates this simultaneously one and different philosophy of the Vedanta Sutra, which begins with Janmadhyasya, the Janmadhyasya Sutra. This knowledge that the energy of the Lord is simultaneously one with and different from the Lord is an answer to the mental speculator's attempt to establish the energy as the absolute. When this knowledge is factually understood, one sees the conceptions of monism and dualism to be imperfect. Development of this transcendental consciousness, grounded in the conception of simultaneously one and different, leads one immediately to the stage of freedom from the threefold miseries. The threefold miseries are: 1, those miseries which arise from the mind and body; 2, those miseries inflicted by other living beings; and 3, those miseries arising from natural catastrophes over which one has no control. Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam begins with the surrender of the devotee unto the absolute person. The devotee is fully aware that he is one with the absolute, and at the same time in the eternal position of servant of the absolute. I'll read that again. The devotee is fully aware that he is one with the absolute, and at the same time in the eternal position of servant of the absolute. In the material conception, one falsely thinks himself the Lord of all he surveys, and therefore he is always troubled by the threefold miseries of life. But as soon as one comes to know his real position as transcendental servant, he at once becomes free from all miseries. As long as the living entity is trying to master material nature, there is no possibility of his becoming servant of the Supreme. Service to the Lord is rendered in pure consciousness of one's spiritual identity. By service, one is immediately freed from material encumbrances. Over and above this, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam is a personal commentation on the Vedanta Sutra by Sri Vedavyas. It was written in the maturity of his spiritual life through the mercy of Narada. Sri Vyasadeva is the authorized incarnation of Narayana, the personality of Godhead. Therefore, there is no question as to his authority. He is the author of all other Vedic literatures, yet he recommends the study of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam above all others. In other Purāṇas, there are different methods set forth by which one can worship the demigods. But in the Bhāgavatam, only the Supreme Lord is mentioned. The Supreme Lord is the total body, and the demigods are different parts of that body. Consequently, one who worships the Supreme Lord does not need to worship the demigods, because the Supreme Lord becomes fixed in the heart of the devotee immediately. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has recommended the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam as the spotless Purāṇa and distinguished it from all other Purāṇas. The proper method for receiving this transcendental message is to hear it submissively. A challenging attitude cannot help one realize this transcendental message. One particular word is used herein for proper guidance. This word is shushrushu. One must be anxious to hear this transcendental message. The desire to sincerely hear is the first qualification. Less fortunate persons are not at all interested in hearing this Srimad-Bhagavatam. The process is simple, but the application is difficult. Unfortunate people find enough time to hear idle social and political conversations, but when invited to attend a meeting of devotees to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam, they suddenly become reluctant, or they indulge in hearing the portion of the Bhagavatam they are unfit to hear. Sometimes professional readers of the Bhagavatam immediately plunge into the confidential topics of the pastimes of the Supreme Lord, which they interpret as sex literature. Srimad-Bhagavatam is meant to be heard from the beginning. Those who are fit to assimilate this work are mentioned in this shloka. One becomes qualified to hear Srimad-Bhagavatam after many pious deeds. The intelligent person, with thoughtful discretion, can be assured by the great sage Vyasadeva that he can realize the Supreme Personality directly by hearing Srimad-Bhagavatam. Without undergoing the difficult stages of realization set forth in the Vedas, one can be lifted immediately to the position of Paramahamsa simply by agreeing to receive this message. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Text 3. And the last invocation verse. Nigamakalpatador galitang palang shukamukad amrita drava samyutam pibada bhagavatam rasam alayam mahur aho rasika bhuvibavukaha. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad-Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures. It emanates from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Purport. In the two previous shlokas, it has been definitely proved that the Srimad-Bhagavatam is the sublime literature which surpasses all other Vedic scriptures due to its transcendental qualities. It is transcendental to all mundane activities and mundane knowledge. In this shloka, it is stated that Srimad-Bhagavatam is not only a superior literature, but is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literature. In other words, it is the cream of all Vedic knowledge. Considering all this, patient and submissive hearing is definitely essential. With great respect and attention, one should receive the message and lessons imparted by the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The Vedas are compared to the desire tree because they contain all things knowable by man. They deal with mundane necessities as well as spiritual realization. The Vedas contain regulative principles of knowledge covering social, political, religious, economic, military, medicinal, chemical, physical, and metaphysical subject matter, and all that may be necessary to keep the body and soul together. Above and beyond all this are specific directions for spiritual realization. Regulated knowledge involves a gradual raising of the living entity to the spiritual platform, and the highest spiritual realization is knowledge that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual tastes, or rasas. Every living entity, beginning from Brahma, the first-born living being within the material world, down to the insignificant ant, desires to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perception. These sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. In the revealed scriptures, the following 12 varieties of rasas are enumerated. 1. Raudra, anger. 2. Adbhuta, wonder. 3. Shringara, conjugal love. 4. Hasya, comedy. 5. Vira, chivalry. 6. Daya, mercy. 7. Dasya, servitorship. 8. Sakya, fraternity. 9. Bhayanaka, horror. 10. Bibhatsa, shock. 11. Shanta, neutrality. 12. Vatsalya, parenthood. The sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. Primarily, such signs of love are manifested in adoration, service, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. And when these 5 are absent, love is present indirectly in anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, fear, shock, and so on. For example, when a man is in love with a woman, the rasa is called conjugal love. But when such loving affairs are disturbed, there may be wonder, anger, shock, or even horror. Sometimes loving affairs between 2 persons culminate in ghastly murder scenes. Such rasas are displayed between man and between animal and animal. There is no possibility of an exchange of rasa between a man and an animal, or between a man and any other species of living being within the material world. The rasas are exchanged between members of the same species, but as far as the spirit souls are concerned, they are one qualitatively with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the rasas were originally exchanged between the spiritual living being and the spiritual whole, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual exchange, or rasa, is fully exhibited in spiritual existence between living beings and the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is therefore described in the Shruti mantras, Vedic hymns, as the fountainhead of all rasas. When one associates with the Supreme Lord and exchanges one's constitutional rasa with the Lord, then the living being is actually happy. These Shruti mantras indicate that every living being has his constitutional position, which is endowed with a particular type of rasa to be exchanged with the personality of Godhead. In the liberated condition only, this primary rasa is experienced in full. In the material existence, the rasa is experienced in the perverted form, which is temporary. And thus the rasas of the material world are exhibited in the material form of raudra, anger, and so on. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are the basic principles of activities, one understand the false representations of the original rasas, which are reflected in the material world. The learned scholar seeks to relish the real rasa in the spiritual form. In the beginning, he desires to become one with the Supreme. Thus, less intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one with the spirit whole, without knowing of the different rasas. In this shloka, it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, due to its being the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. By submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his heart's desire. But one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. Srimad-Bhagavatam is exactly received from the right source because it was brought by Narada Muni from the spiritual world and given to his disciple, Sri Vyasadeva. The latter, in turn, delivered the message to his son, Srila Shukadeva Goswami. And Srila Shukadeva Goswami delivered the message to Maharaj Parikshit during the 7 days before the king's death. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul from his very birth. He was liberated even in the womb of his mother, and he did not undergo any sort of spiritual training after his birth. At birth, no one is qualified, neither in the mundane nor in the spiritual sense. But Shukadeva Goswami, due to his being a perfectly liberated soul, did not have to undergo any evolutionary process for spiritual realization. Yet despite his being a completely liberated person, situated in the transcendental position above the 3 material modes, he was attracted to this transcendental rasa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is adored by liberated souls who sing Vedic hymns. The Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to liberated souls than to mundane people. He is of necessity not impersonal, because it is only possible to carry on transcendental rasa with a person. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are narrated, and the narration is systematically depicted by Srila Shukadeva Goswami. Thus, the subject matter is appealing to all classes of persons, including those who seek liberation to relish the humor of becoming one with the Supreme Whole. In Sanskrit, the parrot is also known as shuka. When a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such birds, its sweet flavor is enhanced. The Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who is compared to the parrot, not for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. The subject matter is so presented through the lips of Srila Shukadeva Goswami that any sincere listener who hears submissively can at once relish transcendental tastes which are distinct from the perverted tastes of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishna Loka. Rather, it comes down carefully through the chain of disciplic succession without change or disturbance. Foolish people who are not in the transcendental disciplic succession commit great blunders by trying to understand the highest transcendental rasa known as the rasa dance, without following in the footsteps of Shukadeva Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully by stages of transcendental realization. One should be intelligent enough to know the position of Srimad-Bhagavatam by considering personalities like Shukadeva Goswami, who deals with the subject so carefully. This process of disciplic succession of the Bhagavat school suggests that in the future also, for all time, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam has to be understood from a person who is factually a representative of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. A professional man who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam illegally is certainly not a representative of Shukadeva Goswami. Such a man's business is only to earn his livelihood. Therefore, one should refrain from hearing the lectures of such professional men. Such men usually go to the most confidential part of the literature without undergoing the gradual process of understanding this grave subject. They usually plunge into the subject matter of the rasa dance, which is misunderstood by the foolish class of men. Some of them take this to be immoral, while others try to cover it up by their own stupid interpretations. They have no desire to follow in the footsteps of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. One should conclude, therefore, that the serious student of rasa should receive the message of the Bhagavatam in the chain of disciplic succession from Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who describes the Bhagavatam from its very beginning and not whimsically to satisfy the mundaner who has very little knowledge in transcendental science. Srimad-Bhagavatam is so carefully presented that a sincere and serious person can at once enjoy the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge simply by drinking the nectarian juice through the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami or his bona fide representative. Hare Krishna. That's the invocation of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The rest of the verses, 17,997, explain those three verses. Hare Krishna. So it's 7:42, it's almost the time, 7:45. So we'll stop the reading today, there, at text 4, and we'll ask for reflections from the assembled sages, assembled here in the cyberspace. Hare Krishna.
From Rasika.
Rasika Shiromani has something here.
Hare Krishna, thank you, Guru Maharaj. It never ceases to amaze me how relishable the Srimad-Bhagavatam is. And since we started, I've been asking myself, what is it that makes the Srimad-Bhagavatam so relishable? I mean, Gita is relishable, CC is relishable, the other books are relishable, but there's something about the Srimad-Bhagavatam that, I don't know if it's just me, but it is so sweet. And it never ceases to be that way. And that was actually answered in these verses tonight, why that's so. And it's has to do with the personalities and the way that it was handed down specifically for the age of Kali through Shukadeva Goswami and his relishing of it, and those that follow him relishing in it has made it very sweet.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, and it's just, I'm really blown away at how relishable the Srimad-Bhagavatam is. It's just, it's an experience not of this world.
Exactly, thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
from Gopakanya Devidasi.
Haribo Gopakanya Devidasi.
Hare Krishna, dear Maharaj, and all assembled sages. Jaya Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, His Divine Grace. Ki Jai.
Rati Manjari.
Haribo Rati.
She says, Jai Guru Maharaj, tuning into transcendence.
Hare Krishna.
Sudevi Dasi says, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Haribo Sudevidasi. Hare Krishna.
And from Bhaktarupa.
Haribo Bhaktarupa.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, very excited to be hearing more of this Srimad-Bhagavatam with you. At the end of the purport to text 2, we heard about the importance of having a desire to hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam. But sometimes less fortunate people, when invited to hear Bhagavatam, become reluctant. I've certainly experienced this reluctance to hear. I wonder why this reluctance is there, and how to overcome it when it comes up. Thanks, Maharaj.
Well, the injunctions of the Shastras give a prerequisite, things that one has to do. Even Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he demands that one surrender to him alone, only. And this hesitation is from the conditioned soul's conditioning, from the modes of nature, for many, many, many births. And therefore there is the habit ingrained in the body and minds of the conditioned souls to want to control, to want to know, and want to enjoy the material energy which doesn't belong to them. So therefore some force is required, and that is what discipline is about. That's what austerity is about. You have to do something that appears to be not objectionable, but uncomfortable, in order to purify one's existence so that we can actually hear without that resistance. The resistance comes from the mind's concoction to enjoy and control everything it comes in contact with, even the sound of the Bhagavatam. When the mind concocts something about what he's hearing, then his submissive hearing stops immediately. The sound has to go through the mind and intelligence down to the soul. The sound of the Bhagavatam is so potent, though, that it bypasses the brain and it goes down to the heart and purifies. Therefore it is called Punya Shavana Kirtana. Just by hearing it, one becomes pious, even if he can't hear completely submissively. But if one hears completely submissively, then that piety becomes gradually transformed into the awakening of original love for Krishna. So therefore, some force is required. One has to force oneself to hear. One has to force oneself to follow the regulations of spiritual life, to rise early, to keep oneself extremely clean, to chant Hare Krishna, to hear these books, and to perform devotional service. So even if we're not pure, the activities that we're doing are pure because they're given to us by the pure personalities. So by association with the pure personalities in the cyclic succession, these literatures, especially the Srimad-Bhagavatam, one conquers this tendency to not want to surrender, and then one can hear. And when one hears on that plane, on the submissive plane, on the spiritual plane, then one gets, as it says in the verses we just read, the personality of Godhead, who is there already in the heart, in the form of the super soul, manifests himself to such a hearer. So the rules and regulations that we force ourselves to hear, and are meant to bring us to the platform of submissive hearing. Hare Krishna.
From Shraddhanjali.
Shraddhanjali, Hari Bol, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
And from Anandamurti Devidasi.
Yes, Anandamurti Devidasi.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada, Shri Jai.
It is very important to hear the Srimad-Bhagavatam from the right source. The persons who hear this transcendental message are so fortunate.
Yes, perfectly correct. Thank you.
From Shyam Kishore.
Haribol Sham Kishore. Hope you're having a good marathon.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai, all glories to Srila Prabhupada.
What stood out for me is by submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his heart's desire. I want to attain that. Constantly stay in association with pure devotees and stay happy, even if in the material world.
Nice realization. Seems like this Sankirtan suits you, and Hare Krishna, please continue. Seems to be having the proper effect. Hare Krishna, very nice.
And from Rati Manjari.
Jai Rati.
She says, Dear Guru Maharaj, please accept my respectful obeisances. Tonight we heard the auspicious invocation verses of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. You have often stressed that the Srimad-Bhagavatam is eternal and does not change. I have also heard that in higher planets, the Srimad-Bhagavatam contains more than 18,000 verses. I was wondering how we can balance these two statements. Would you please explain?
The Srimad-Bhagavatam reveals itself according to the capacity of the hearer. So in the higher planets, the Srimad-Bhagavatam is history of the universe. And the persons in the highest planets, Janaloka, Tapaloka, Satyaloka, they have much more capacity to hear. Therefore, they hear the whole thing. We have a small capacity. Therefore, we're given the 18,000 shloka version. And if you want to find, how do I say, solutions to apparent contradictions, it requires not just an intellectual analysis or argument, or even something that we've heard that explains it completely. There are certain things that we can't understand unless we're spiritually elevated. And that's as far as I can take it. It's coming from Jiva Goswami, from the Tattva Sandarbha, that the Bhagavatam is Shruti. And that was the basic point that I was repeating from Gopi Purāṇa Prabhu. But it doesn't mean that the version that Srila Prabhupada mentions, the billion verse version, is not Shruti or is not the same. And how it is the same, maybe we have to wait to be able to have that revealed to us completely. Hare Krishna. But we're here, we're not in the heavenly planets. We don't have access to the billion verse version, so we should be satisfied with the version that we've been given by Shukadeva Goswami. His repeating of the Bhagavatam word for word, he didn't change one word, is also, but at the same time, it became sweeter. That's what that verse means. The parrot touches the beak with its, cut the beak with its, the skin of the fruit with its beak, and it becomes sweeter. So just because the sound came from the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami, it became sweeter. Not because he spoke some particular realization or not. Therefore, if we repeat the Bhagavatam without changing the essence, without changing the message, it gets sweeter and sweeter. That is inconceivable. So some things are just not conceivable fully by anyone except for Krishna, and we have to be satisfied with that. We have to be satisfied that we won't be able to understand every little detail and reconcile every apparent contradiction before we surrender. That may be the materialistic way of accepting things as true, but the way that the Bhagavatam teaches is, and Krishna teaches in the Gita, is you surrender and then you will understand. Not that you understand and then you can surrender. That appears, what's the word, contradictory, but it's not. Because surrender to Krishna is an ongoing process over lifetime and lifetimes over lifetimes. And when one does come to the point of surrender, then he gets everything. Then he can understand. That's as far as I can take it by my limited understanding. Hare Krishna. So once again, you all have outdone yourselves? Yes.
Rati Manjari just commented. She says, "Thank you, Guru Maharaj. I appreciate your way of answering. Certainly I am not ready to receive or realize the Srimad-Bhagavatam in its entirety. I hope and pray to continue to hear from you, and then by your mercy one day I will fully surrender."
Well, the Srimad-Bhagavatam, it is the complete Bhagavatam. Don't think that you need to hear the billion verse version, in order to be able to understand the Bhagavatam completely. The 18,000 verse Bhagavatam is enough. Hare Krishna.
And a comment from Anandamurti.
Jaya Anandamurti.
Yesterday I and 2 more devotees did Hare Krishna Mahamantra Kirtan in front of 71 people in a place of business, a business meeting in Osaka.
Joy, Haribo.
All were Japanese, and 40 of them already had the Bhagavad Gita from me at the last meetup.
Nice.
Most people chanted Mahamantra for a first time.
Very nice.
Some people are very interested to know about Krishna and Bhagavad Gita.
Very nice.
I have distributed Bhagavad Gita and Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita also. Thank you so much for blessing our services always. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Nandamurti. Keep up the good work. You're going to make all of us suckers Krishna consciousness at this rate. Hare Krishna. Very nice. That's the taste. By doing this, by hearing and explaining, then you get the taste. And it's the taste we're looking for, and that's the point. That was made in these verses, especially the third one. You know, it's not intellectual, it's not information content, it's a taste. We're looking for the taste, to relish, the ability to relish the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Then if one is an erudite scholar or not, or has intellectual capacity or not, one gets everything. Hare Krishna.
Rati Manjari commented, "Again, you are always carefully pruning my utterings, always protecting me. Thank you."
Hare Krishna. Yes, I wasn't saying that just for you, but yes, it's true also. Hare Krishna. Thank you, thank you. All right, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaur Premanandi. Hari Hari Bo. See you tomorrow night, same time, same place, same topic. The Bhagavatam expands itself by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and the previous acharyas, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, to all of us. Hare Krishna.